Florian, could you tell us how you related to Samir and what you think are his legacies?
Well, I started to read Samir Amin. It was in the 70s or last 60s. And I always thought that it was the most clever analyst of the world situation, and also the man who provides the best ideas on strategy, general strategy. And we were reading with several comrades his books, and I was preparing, summarize, and so on, and we had discussion about it and so. And at the beginning of the 80s, I went to Dakar, to Senegal, in fact, also with the idea to meet Samir Amin. So I went to his office and I met him. I explained what I was doing and also why I wanted to, I wished to meet him, and he was immediately very friendly one. He's probably friendly with a lot of people, so. But they invited me to his flat. We had lunch with him and with Isabel. And I went there with a small paper, a hand written. It was a summary of his ideas. We were discussing with other comrades, and so asked him if it was okay in his view. He said very well. He was very gentle. He said, "Okay, no, it's perfect." So, and during the year later, I continued to read a lot, and Samir Amin, and I have always the impression that he was able to explain very clearly what I was thinking myself. But in fact, that I was just following him in my head. So it's. I think that well, a lot of it has been said about his legacy. About of course, the question of unequal development, of the theory of value on the world level, and so on, are very important. But also, I do think that his way of thinking the transformation of the world on a long run, and trying to propose strategies, general strategies, of course, which were linked with always with the transformation of the reality, and try to be practical, in some way practical, and not. He was not thinking that the reality of the evolution should match with the idea of a perfect society he would have, or anyone could have, but that it was just a way, a practical way also. Well, there are objectives, of course, and we have to think state and so on, but it was just always very conscious that the reality is much richer than any reality we can hope and think. That's a reason. I mean, it's a way of trying to be of any help for the struggle, which is the right one. And he had that one.
We want to hear your story.
Well, I was born in a small city in Switzerland. My father was left-wing communist, but not very active, in fact. My mother too. He was more an anti-fascist militant, you know. And, well, when I was very young, I was of a leftist thought, but not an active militant. I became a militant during my university time, and then I had the idea of being a film producer, of film documents and so on. But I changed my mind, and I became rather quickly a professional, more or less professional militant in a communist organization, working half-time for earning money in different small work like taxist and so on. And I have been also working in a library for several years. And when I met for the first time Samir Amin, I was working there. And then I had the opportunity to be engaged by CETIM as professional, half-time, part-time, half-time. So it was the first time that I had a professional work which was also a militant work. And so I continue for years. My organization, the organization I was member of was a organization linked. It's a big word, but with the Communist Party of China. I went to China once in 1979 with a delegation of our very small party, you know, or it was. So I went there, and but our party collapsed in the 80s. Meanwhile, with a lot of other parties, and I continued with a small group in Geneva to try to maintain and to develop an activity and also an analysis of the situation. And I'm still working there, but practically now I am mainly active with CETIM. Well, that's my work, my space of militancy.
But how is it to be a communist in Switzerland?
Well, you know, I would say that to me it was something obvious by a rather theoretical way. Analyzing the society, how it works, and so on. Now I'm more and more, it is less, I am more convinced by the reality, I would say, that at the beginning it was more an abstract way of thinking. But if you read the reality, if you observe the reality, years after years, it is obvious that it is not a objective or a ideal society. It is a necessity. for humankind. I do think so, but I'm not sure, and less sure, that we can reach transform society. Also, of course, it is not. There is no end. There is communism will not achieved. There will always be some kind of fight or renewal of the old society, who try to renew the old society and so on. I'm sure of it. So as long as there will be a humanity, probably there will be a fight. But a society which has no more exploitation and relationship between men, human beings, and also which is more rational in its relation with environment. This is necessary, and I do think that with a society which is driven by profit, expansion of economy, it is not possible, just not possible. And we can see it every day. And we have new technology, always new technology are used in a wrong way, and to develop a society or production more and more important, but not to satisfy the main needs of basic needs of the old people in the wood. So the reason, of course, I went to I define myself as a communist, but also, of course, you can wonder how you can be communist in Switzerland. That's a question, but there are a lot of not a lot, but there are communists in Switzerland, and there has been for a very long time communists in Switzerland, and you know that several meeting of the first international has been held in Switzerland, so it is not totally a surprise.
But then your friends, your family, then well, it's good that your family, your parents were communists. But then do you have brothers and sisters? And
maybe.
Do you have brothers and sisters? And
No, I have no brothers and sisters. But my family, father family, is rather left. The family of my mother was rather Catholic, generous, but Catholic, traditional, and so on. It was not the case of my mother, but her parents were like this. Well, there is a legend that my grandmother, the mother of my father, was in relationship, scriptural relationship with Rosa Luxembourg. But it is, I think it is a family legend. Well, it's like this.
Yeah, but that's a very good legend. Yes. But then, well, how did the Swiss Communist Party collapse?
Well, you know, at that time there were several communist parties in Switzerland. Several organizations which called themselves communist, and I do think that as far as our organization is concerned, it was them. We were, most of us were young, and it was a time of disillusion with, I think a lot of people thought that we would have changed, rather rapid change. It was 10 years before ago, it was Mai 68, you know, and so on. So it was this idea of the change is going to run rather rapidly, and we had, on the contrary, the way of the beginning of neoliberal thought and policy, and so it was a shock, and also probably, for as far we are concerned, but it was the same for other organizations. But probably also the change in China was not a good message for us. I don't think. So a lot of comrades, we had a meeting, a meeting, and we decided to stop with the organization. I was against it. I tried to make another one, it was a small one, and what we did. But most of our comrades continued to be leftist activists, more at the level of association, urban association, trade unions, and so on and so on. So they didn't they were not anymore active, most of them active in a party or a so-called party.
So, are you also the May 68 generation?
Well, surely. Well, I think that more have been more clever, I would say, on political questions. The more I was in the idea that Mai 68 was a big movement, but it was not a situation of revolution. So it was just I don't know the word in English. You know, I don't speak English for years and years, and so I have to find out my words. But no, I'm rather distant now with the idea of Mai 68 was really a revolution, revolutionary time, and with a lot of ideas which was imagined or defended in Mai 68. I think it is, well, it's important, of course, but it's a movement of young people. And the reason why also I think there were some distance by other older parties, Communist Party with Mai 68, but also in France the Communist Party of France didn't support or followed correctly, I think, this movement. He was rather defensive in this situation, but voilà.
So I know that CETIM is now working on the question of sovereignty of the peasants, their rights.
Yes. Well, we have been analyzing the situation of the peasants for years and years and years. Sorry. And we get in contact with La Via Campesina, And at the end of the 19th, yes, a few years after the creation of Via Campesina, and they asked, well, people from Indonesia, part of Via Campesina, had at that time the idea of trying to have a new instrument, official international instrument to fight against the abuse of human rights, peculiar human rights of peasants. And they asked CETIM if we could help them in this idea, because we have a status with the UN system in Geneva. So now it is, there has been 17 years that we are working on that question precisely, to obtain a declaration, official declaration, which is with a content in the great lines decided on, imagined by the peasants themselves, the peasants organization. So we hope and we think this declaration will contain the main ideas, the main revendication, the main view on human rights for peasants and people on a rural area, and also fishermen and so on. The main ideas of people concerned on their organization, and it was not a document prepared by in its development by diplomats or states and so on, but many through the meetings and the examination and the discussion of the peasants' organization, of course, has to adopt the language, UN language. It was written and rewritten and rewritten. The peasants' organization followed it years after years, or several times per year, and we were always in Geneva at their side in this work. So that's the reason we are preparing a book about it, which will be in French in a paper version, and in English and Spanish in a e-book. And normally all of that would be finished up in January or February next year. So we hope first that the declaration will be adopted. We have to wait, not to wait, still to act, but until the last day, because and also after that we know, and the peasant knows better than us, that paper is only a paper if you don't fight to have it implemented or use it in your fight and so on. So it's just a paper. It will be just a paper, so most of work should be done afterwards. But we think that it could be a good instrument because, well, as Samir Amin explained it several times, and you are working on that subject also, that the peasants are a very important part of the society. To CETIM, we were, I would say, even surprised to see how Via Campesina, for example, had a very open mind on the situation. They had to think about the question of women, the question of new technology, or the question of peace, the question, and so a lot of questions they are thinking about, and have a position about it, which much more than nowadays than trade unions, workers, fabric trade unions, much more, unfortunately. So, well.
So it's mainly the Via Campesina that's working on this, or is it involved in organizations? And what's your role?
As far as the organization of peasants, it's mainly them, but there are also organization of fishermen and so on, or indigenous people. But there is, apart from that, there are several organizations which are supporting it, well, from the civil society, human rights organization, and so on, defenders, and so on. But the principal actor was the Via Campesina, clearly, and we were always. CETIM was really always in very close touch with them, so. We can say that we were also an actor on that question.
And Samir has written about this on the. Can you tell me about the book that has been written?
Samir? No, he didn't follow over. He probably he knew that, but no, the book we have produced is about the situation. We have published. Samir Amin's book is partly about the question of a peasant question and agriculture, but there is no allusion to this UN process. That's something different.
Mm-hmm. So. But then people say, why would you want to have a declaration of the rights of the peasants? You can just say human rights in general, etc. So could you explain that?
Well, that's the reason why. That's the idea of the Via Campesina. And all these things started in Indonesia, with several meetings of peasant organization of Indonesia. And the idea is that the texts existing about human rights are not sufficient to deal with the situation of peasants. And there is the question of the land, the question of themes, different questions which are not retreated sufficiently or clearly enough to deal with the situation of peasants and the violation, abuse they are in front of. Like, we have a special declaration or text about the women. We could say also human rights was sufficient. We didn't need any special document on women and indigenous people also, and so on. So the idea is that this text is dealing with the special issue which are important for peasants. Of course, a declaration is just a declaration in the UN system, so it is my main text to refer to in the fights. There is no obligation of any government or any tribunal to refer to it if you are not pushing them to do so.
And But maybe the one last question is, how do you see the La Via Campesina today? Because the peasantry has been very much under attack, and there has been the change to industrial agriculture, and the displacement and dispossession of the peasantry, with the question of land, and it's happening everywhere. So from your, because you have worked so closely and so intensely on the peasant question for all these years, so could you summarize in a way how you see the peasant question today, and what could be some of the moves we can take as alternatives?
Well, of course, you have all the aspect of the way to produce and to send, to commercialize alimentation products. This is one point. But the main point, and I do think that's also the point of Via Campesina, is to come back to the situation, in some ways is to come back to the situation that when the policy, agricultural policy, was a question of the country, part of the country sovereignty. That is, you have in this way a change that peasants movement, but also citizen movement, democratically decides how to produce, what to produce, and how to commercialize the production of the land and so on. So this is, to me, and I think mainly to Via Campesina, like the question of food sovereignty is a very important question. That doesn't mean that it is a solution, but it is also, again, a necessity, just a starting point. And otherwise, all the very important food question for the whole humanity, and therefore for environment and other animals and so on, would remain in the hands of big companies and so on, not in the direction of a better alimentation and to take care of the land and so on, but only for the profit, and in a way, a stupid way, we can see every day. So, you know, in Switzerland we are going to have a votation in 3 weeks. Unitaire, it is a small peasant organization. Well, small, not so small, but not the biggest one, which is part of Via Campesina, has written down what we call an initiative. This is a text written down by persons, citizens. They have to collect a large number of signatures, 100,000 signatures of citizens, in order to have it discussed and voted by the parliament, and if the parliament doesn't agree, by people. So we are in this process, and in 3 weeks, the people of Switzerland, the citizens of Switzerland, are going to vote on a text for food sovereignty in Switzerland. And it is a rather well-detailed text on the question of price, on the question of subsidy, on the question of OGM, and so on. All the question of rather precisely defined, and well, it is not so stupid to hope that it could be accepted by the people. You know, because we are the peasants are rather respect in our country. That's one point. We are a rich country, and so it is not sure that it would be rejected by a majority of the voters. I would say it is possible that it would be accepted. The first, comment est-ce qu'on appelle ça? The first opinion inquiry, were saying that 75, something like that, person were in favor of it, but it is now we have 55 person in favor of it and 40 against it. But it is only opinions, so we will see in 3 weeks. So when I come back to Switzerland, I will participate in this campaign to try to have the positive answer. And if it is the case, I do think that it could be a help for other people, just because it would be an example. We have this opportunity to have this kind of votation. Not a lot of country where citizens can propose a new law and have a discussion about it and to make it vote. So it might be, even if we are a small country and a rich country, it could be a help for other fight in other parts of the world.
But when people object, what are the main reasons for objecting?
Well, I do think the campaign against it now is, well, it is impossible. It would be very bureaucratic, but the main argument against it now is the food would be much more would cost much more than now. But you know that in Switzerland, well, the statistic doesn't mean a lot, but the larger part of a family budget is for insurances, rent of flat, and so on. It is not the question of food. Well, for the very low salaries or revenue, it is still a part more or less important. But the people are just confronted to the rent of the flats, the insurances, and so on. This is the main problem. And not a question of the cost of the food for most of people.